Great. So let's get on into Unit 6 in our GitHub, and we'll talk a little bit about where we've gone and where we are right now. And probably this title is going to sound a little bit mystifying. It's going to be hard to really imagine what we're going after this week, and really even the relevance of it just from the title. You know, you all are smart. You're all looking at it, and you're thinking, okay, he's got a title for Unit 6. What does that mean? But I think looking at where you guys have gone, you know, from the basics into object-oriented programming to JSON, then to the cloud, and doing a whole lot with the cloud, i.e. querying, CRUD, you know, get, put, update, deletes, and now you're into 6, and you realize, well, you guys have a very full JavaScript toolkit for making anything happen as it pertains to moving data into the cloud, getting data back from the cloud, changing the data in the cloud, specifying the data that you want to go after, and then making that data look interesting and readable on your page. You know, you guys have an incredible tool set for really delivering the most high-value tasks that web development asks you. So at this point, you guys are kind of out of the data business because you've got that under your belt. You know how to do it all. And just visiting with people, if you know how to do the CRUD from last week, that was an awesome bit of troubleshooting. And what I'm saying that, the reason why I'm saying that, I'm being very clear, is because I have not babied you guys at all. I have given you guys professional code to learn. I've shown you the same cloud that Netflix uses. If you go to work at Netflix to develop, you'll be at the same thing. You'll be like, this is strangely not dramatic, because they have the same fundamental tool set to work with every day as you guys. The same security hurdles to figure out, the same JSON element. Now, probably, you know, as you go into next week, you're realizing that you're going to be uploading large pieces of media to the cloud at that point. I think you're going to destroy it. I think you're going to work with it very effectively. Now, I make fun of this class because the way that we used to teach this class is in the first or second week, we would teach people how to do the upload. And then we would begin with the JavaScript, or we'd teach a little JavaScript, then we get into objects, and we'd barely get through the query part by the end of the class, and there would be like 3 or 4 genius students who would have hacked, you know, the query, and they were the team leaders. But this time around, we've really changed the way the course works. And so by now, just about every single student, you know, we've taken it so that now, you know, it used to be that 10% of the class would get the query. Now everybody gets the query. And then we take it beyond. So everybody is developer class. So if you had not been thinking about programming professionally, by now we're going to encourage you to consider it very seriously, because you could exit the course in a few weeks and you could go to work doing that which we've done in the course for money, and a lot of money for that. If you're a developer in LA County, you know, you're going to be making, you know, 200 grand, you know, within about 10 years of doing that. You know, so you're paid, or 250, you know, close to 300 grand with bonuses. You're paid as an attorney. You know, you're paid lawyer money, you know, with some experience. You won't get 200K off the bat, but in a major American city, you'll be making that, you know, once you're, you know, 10, 12 years in. But you will be making that 100 grand almost instantly, because major corporations, if they want to be in San Francisco or Los Angeles or Chicago or New York, even places like Miami, they need to be offering close to 6 figures or well beyond it if they want to get your attention. And if you're coming in with these skills, you'll be able to hang with a developing team. I would just say to my own children, look, when you exit school, you want to be already, you know, very upper middle class, you know, making 80K out of school. And that's frankly what they need to pay the developers. The developers get the most money at this point, because if an operation has good software and has good web development, the operation is going to succeed. If they haven't focused on development, they just won't be equivalent to those who do. You know, if you look at Walmart, FedEx, you know, and I was just thinking of others, especially Amazon, you know, really web development is what they excel at. And frankly, you guys would not take those businesses seriously, you know, eBay, Craigslist, if they did not have very professional web development. And so that brings me to my next point, which is that let's say that you have a world-class ability to move data around the internet, such as you have. Well, what comes next? Well, some of the things are the limits of the web page. Now, you all have this tab. It's called a window. That's the limits of the browser. Now, if you get into Chrome, the tab is sacred ground. Tab actually, within Chrome, the tab is its own virtual machine. It has a small hypervisor or a small version of an operating system allocating and deallocating and releasing and allocating memory in a sophisticated way. The tab here within a given browser operates in that way. But the issue is, how do you make a browser work like an object-oriented piece of Java? Now, you guys are already good at programming objects. You go back into Unit 3 or JavaScript objects. These are some of the first things that we were looking at, is making objects out of JavaScript. And so you guys had the ability to use objects, but the difference is, can you make an object that lasts while your website is running? Now, frankly, if you were to run a piece of Java on your desktop, that object would be alive while your program is running. And the difference here is that as you move between web pages, that object may not be available as you move from one web page to another. And in the past, we didn't have very sophisticated JavaScript. So object-oriented JavaScript had limited use because that object would only be alive while the page was loaded. And you guys all know that really the essence of the web is navigation, is moving from one page to another. And especially because workflow is built of navigation, the browser has limits as a software engineering platform. So corporations like Google have made the browser their major priority and have created these different tools for us. But what I want to go through right now is, well, how do I solve the problem of having a really rich website with many, many interactions that's collecting lots of data? What if I were to lose some of the data as I move from one page to the next? How do I store data so that I can use it later? And really, I want to advance two very special techniques. One is cookies, which has been a part of the internet now for quite some time and is a fundamental tool set. And you guys are at the right moment to learn cookies because you have a lot of data moving around. You want to store it. And then the other is URL parameters, which are at really the core of very sophisticated web development. So I want to jump in at the cookies first. So let me grab my cookie sampler, and you guys should feel free to just grab cookie sampler. And what it is it's basically within the head, we establish a script. And then on the body, we only have two things happening. One is just when the body loads, we're going to check the cookie. Now, what the cookie does is it stores data that was established during prior uses of your website, during previous instances or sessions within your website. Check cookie is going to say, well, go ahead and look at the cookie that's entitled username. Now, a cookie is a little tiny file that exists within your browser, and as you log in, and I'm not going to go through this in depth because there's probably 1.5 billion cookies on my machine. I haven't cleared them out, but you should be able to check out the value of cookies that have already been set there. And a cookie is just a little file that contains a trivial amount of data where it says username is equal to Hector, and that's comma, last time of use equal to February 13, 2017. Date of birth is equal to, Facebook ID is equal to, city of access is equal to. And so what's cool about cookies is we can store lots of information about that user. And then if they cancel our web page, they log out, or they navigate away, or they close the tab, the data will still be there. So that offers some very big advantages. It's like a little local database in a very limited way. So check cookie calls get cookie, and get cookie will read the cookie by splitting up the cookie that was set by this website, and then returning, and we can go through this in a separate talk, but basically parsing the cookie that was set earlier and then unpacking all of the names of the cookies that were set there. Now, in this instance, we set a cookie there named username. And then in the future, if there's nothing there, if we don't see anything within the cookie, we're actually going to say, okay, go ahead and tell us what your name is. And then we'll set a cookie with your username equivalent to what we just grabbed from an alert box. And so set cookie is all about grabbing the time and then setting an expiration date. And all cookies need to expire. Even Google's cookie, which expires, I think, 1,000,000 years from now, which is a fairly, conservative estimate of how long Google will be here. And then we set the cookie name, very simple. So these fundamental mechanisms are very valuable to us. Now, I would recommend you going to Mozilla's reference page with any questions that you may have and using Mozilla MDN as kind of the Bible. And they have tons of code samples and other valuable stuff that can explicate that code further. So let's go. So when I load up that code right here, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to check cookie, and it sees that nothing has been set there. So I'm going to say, Stefan Bund, your instructor, just something that is memorable, and I'll say OK. And then it loads the page. Now I provide a little link to NDN right here just so that you remember where to go to investigate the cookies. MDN is just the pro place to learn. And this, if I could pass you off with some good habits, brush your teeth, make your bed, and look at Mozilla Developer Network, where this is kind of the heart of JavaScript as it evolves. Mozilla's job is to kind of make the web as learnable as possible. And you can see here that they will really document how to set cookies if cookies is something that you really feel like you want to get into. I would recommend cookies as a very cool and intellectual way to make your website outstanding, to make it do things well beyond. So what I'm going to do here is, because I'm going to reload this page, and when I do, it's going to check my cookie, and if the cookie is there, it's going to be like, hi, Stefan Bund, your instructor, welcome again, right? It's going to say, check the cookie, and if the cookie called username, if the cookie has a key name username, it's going to say, hi there, whatever your name is. Now, some other things that you can do is you can empty out the caches, which may log you off, and disable the caches. And in that regard, that may well delete that cookie. But in this case, I'm not going to go deeply into how to erase the cookies, but each of you has the ability how to undo the cookies by going into security or privacy. I know Chrome has a you go to advanced settings in Chrome and you can delete all the prior cookies that were set. All right, so that is the cookies. Now cookies will store data between different sessions. So for example, setting a shopping cart, like adding something to your shopping cart and keeping it during a session, that could be a good idea. What if you set some cookies and then you put some stuff in your shopping cart and then you go away for a few days and then you come back and you want to get access to that shopping cart again? Well, that would be possible if the cookie would set up enough variables to maintain the state of a shopping cart. That could be very, 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 very valuable. So let's say cookies are a really cool way to store data in between different usages and beyond. Now, let's also admit that, and this is my next sample, which is the file, the link with query results. This is probably a very long name. But what we've been looking at is, let's go ahead and do a query and show, make lots of links from the query. You're probably familiar with this. And the minute it loads, it runs a query. And you can see just down in the status bar, if you just look at the status bar down here, this is the URL to that web page. It's the name of my buckets, and then it's the name of that file. It's basically the bucket name plus this. But if you go down there, you can see that there's been some extra data that's been added to the URL. And here in my live class, I'm just kind of pointing at it, and I can't move my cursor very well. But go ahead and look down at the bottom of my screen right down here right now. You can see in the status bar that you've got the bucket name, Amazon.com, AWS website, the long cookbook with some coding there. Unit 6 show the CRUD after URL parameters. and then value 1 is equal to me, value 2 is equal to me 2, and value 3 is equal to me 3. So what I'm doing is I'm actually adding data and variables that are initialized into the URL itself. So when I go into the URL up top here, I'm not just navigating to the page. I'm actually sending data to that page as I navigate to it. So the page initializes with those variables set up in the URL. Now, to me, when you guys log into your Gmail or you log into your webmail, your URL parameters are going nuts. The URL is likely has a security code logged into it. It has other, maybe the message that's being loaded there. And one of the cool things about web-based email is that as you navigate between the different pages, it moves from the big long listing of all your messages to maybe a web page where you look at that message. So many query parameters need to be loaded before that next page needs to appear. So you're saying, okay, I know how to do cookies. Cookies are a way to store data in a website. But what if I could just tell the next page what it needs to know to load effectively? That's what URL parameters are doing. So what is happening here, let's move back, is I'm going to load up the CRUD page that you're familiar with. But the minute that it loads, it's going to have data inside of these text inputs right here. So let's kind of look behind the scenes at the console at what's happening. So you can see that this is the name of the URL. Pretty interesting. And I've set up an object when it loads where value 1 is equal to me, value 2 is equal to me 2, and value 3 is me 3. And I unpack this just to prove how I've moved the data to the other page. And what I've done is I've taken the data and I've stuffed it into the boxes. So you can see here, I start with a URL. And then what I do is I take my URL and I add these parameters to the back of it. Value 1 is equal to me, and value 2 is equal to me 2, and value 3 is equal to me 3. And all of those are set after my my URL parameters are initialized with the question mark. So what happens is the web browser reads this part, reads all of this, and then the minute that it gets here, it doesn't navigate to this location. It sends these URL parameters to the next web page. Now, what's interesting about when you use Amazon Web Services S3, you can't have a slash right here. Like you can have a slash right here, but you can't have a slash right here. And that may be different between other websites. So that's what's happening. That is a little bit different than what you had earlier. And of course, that's all triggered from the test query, something you already have. So it'll be very easy for you to add, attribute for anchor is now going to be the same thing that you had, but you're going to add these cool URL parameters instead. So let's go to the next page. And this is kind of technical, so I appreciate you sticking with me, but you're going to want this at some point. And for the show CRUD page, CRUD is going to open up. It's going to authenticate to AWS. And then the first, in the same way the response did. But the difference here is we're going to grab the URL from the website bar. It's called window.location.href. That's this value right there. Very important. And then so I'm going to prove that I'm reading that by logging that console. So I'm going to show that off right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and break up. This is just happening in the response.status part. of status change callback, I'm going to create a new variable called x, and I'm going to break up those URL parameters using a function I wrote, and then I'm going to show the different parameters here, and then I'm going to populate key value, attribute text, and value text with the value that I came up with. So let's go to break up URL parameters. Now I'm going to set up a value called link, which is going to be, I'm going to create an invisible anchor, and then I'm going to set the attribute of that anchor to be the URL that we're sending in, which is equal to this. And then we're going to say, well, that path variable is this, such as we do right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a JavaScript object which has the host name, the port, if any, in case it's a non-standard port. And then I'm going to make what's called a map out of the link, and this is the search bar. And this is kind of the major product that I'm going to send back. Then the path name and the protocol. Now, mapmaker is a function that I'm going to write right here, where I'm going to read into the URL. And then I'm going to create an array called output no dupes and the returnable array. And you can go through this, but I'm going to basically break up this value. I'm going to take all the slashes away, and every time there's a slash, I'm going to split it up. But if I have an and symbol there, such as I do at the back end of my URL, if I run into an and symbol or an ampersand, such as I do right here, I want to interpret that differently. And so I want to create a returnable array based upon everything that gets split up using that ampersand. Now that's going to be a very fast discussion, but it takes place within the space of a map. And the map is a little bit like an array, but it's a little bit like a dictionary, where one key is equal to this, another key is equal to this, another key is equal to this. It's a part of the generic data structures surrounding JavaScript. It's intermediate to advanced JavaScript. We're going to introduce the map right here for those interested. And you can see right here as I undo the map is in the business of saying, well, 1 is equal to me, URL param 2 is equal to me 2, and 3 is equal to me 3. And so I'm going to take the end values of that, and I'm going to substitute that into my input boxes right here. And that's all going to be a part of the search part of this URL. And the search is a keyword that stands for all of the pieces of the path name there. Now what's cool about this path name is it has several URL parameters. And this will be over in a minute, so just stick with me. I know there's a lot of new stuff here. These URL parameters, value 1, value 2, and value 3, they are part of the search string. And so value 1, value 2, and value 3 get output here just so we can illuminate how that search string is made. I think if you're a programmer, you're always thinking about variables. Variables are kind of the currency of programming. Variables will hold the data that the public is desperate to learn about. What their bank account is, what the score of the game was, what the name of somebody is. These are all life or death pieces of data that make apps and websites kind of the stuff of life, the stuff that life's built with. So as a programmer, you're always thinking about, well, how do I get to the value of things? And so what you're looking at here is this is the value of variables as they're moved around the internet within that URL parameter. And so I want to emphasize the search is that string that we have up there. And that is the sum total of Unit 6 concepts. You see just how fast these pages work. Just a quick statistic. One of the big rationale that we had you guys use S3 to do your hosting and your back end is the fact that when you use a static website, such as the one you're using, your security goes way up. The hackability of the website is virtually eliminated under modern conditions. But also, the speed of the website increases about 6 times versus their more traditional, PHP and JSP versions. So you guys arrive at your first job, your first web dev job, with 6 times the speed and many, many, many more times the security of the previous version of your employer's website, which means that you're a little cannonball. It's just a matter of time before you land somewhere and do some damage. You're loaded with the latest and greatest. We have not taught you obsolete stuff that was cool 15 years ago, such as I think my colleagues enjoy. This is the new stuff. Not my colleagues here, but I think it's very traditional for teachers to teach you something kind of old school, just for, I don't know, for character building, no good reason. So let's back up here to the GitHub. This will be the 3 files that we need to see within your next micro project. One is the cookie sampler, where you can set cookies. Then these, where you can set up URL parameters and move them around your website. And so kind of, I think cookies are good because you can kind of pick up where you left off, or you can get some data that maybe you set a little while ago, and now you can get that data back, whatever that is. And this, it helps you to continue a task on the next page. Maybe you updated some information on one page and you need for the next page to respect that and maybe remember it. This is a very fair way to pass data back between pages without using up bandwidth or server capacity. So in both instances, we have this idea of persisting data within the client, or keeping data alive within the client experience and building up convenience now that you guys have all the data. Like, you guys are data wizards, especially if you got all 4 of the CRUD parameters. Heck, even if you got all 3 of the, even if you only got 3 of the CRUD operations from last week, you're going to be a data wizard. And that's what differentiates you versus the UX developers, right? Or the designers, of which there are an increasing number. For some reason, we're not increasing the number of programmers out there. That's good for you, because the number of your competition is not growing. You'd be shocked at how appreciated developers are. Like, if you want to be appreciated, be a developer. Those people, we're not, it's like manufacturing dinosaurs. We're not making a lot more dinosaurs these days. Oil continues to be valuable. We just don't have much more of it. Most people reject the task of being a dev. That's why in this class, we needed to redesign a little bit and say, well, how do we get everybody coding? How do we get everybody's talent working? So anyhow, that's our talk. Go to it. You get your new skills.